Perfect. So, hello everyone. Welcome to another pre-law shadow session. My name is Christine Kaleli, and I will be hosting the session tonight. I'm very, very pleased to have Jessica here to talk a little bit about her legal experiences as well as her journey into becoming a lawyer. I know she acted as counsel in numerous jury trials and she represented clients at many levels in Ontario, including the Supreme Court of Canada, which I'm super excited to talk about. So yeah, just a bit about myself. I'm going into my fourth year at U of T and I'm majoring in political science and I'm doing a double minor in international studies and public law. And I do have aspirations of becoming a lawyer in the future. So that's just a little bit about me. And without further ado, I'll pass the mic on to Jessica to briefly introduce herself and then we'll get on to the questions. You can go ahead.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, can you hear what that was?
Uh, it's a little bit like kind of I can't hear you that well. So try speaking again, maybe.
Okay. Um, can you hear me now? Is it better? Okay.
Better.
Great. Thank you.
Perfect.
Sorry about that. My
Okay.
my husband was blending. Um, so I'm Jessica. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I believe you said you were studying international let's say political science. Okay, well I studied just political science in my undergrad. I did a specialization. And I also did French language studies in my undergrad. I went to University of Toronto. Uh, and then for law school, I went to Osgoode Hall. And between law school and university, I worked at a criminal, well, with criminal lawyers. I wouldn't go so far to say it was a firm. It was three sole practitioners. Um, and I basically ran their office, and it was from there that I got experience in sort of the legal field especially in the area of criminal defense. And I realized this was something that I was deeply passionate about and sort of had a knack for. And that was the beginning of my legal career, if you will. And after that, about 3.5 years of working there, I decided to go to law school. And I applied, I got in, and um, usually in this job opportunities in law school open up for students in their um, it's called like a second year recruitment. So in my second year, I applied everywhere possible, like all the jobs. I really cast a wide net, and I got a couple of interviews, but I was hired at a criminal law firm in Toronto called Adams, and that was sort of the beginning of the end. I summered there in my second year, and then I articled there, and they hired me back as an associate after my articles. And after I was an associate there for a while, and I was my practice. I built my practice, which was a mix of criminal trial work and appellate advocacy. And about 4.5 years into being a lawyer, I uh, was hired. I switched firms and I went to Lockyer Campbell Posner, and I was there for about a year until the firm disbanded because Phil Campbell became a judge at the Superior Court in Toronto, and Lockyer and Posner went their own ways. For a brief period of time, I was at it is very recent too. I was at a firm called Ruby Schiller and Anadra Di Giuseppe. And as of Monday of this week, I am now an associate again with Lockyer, James Lockyer at Lockyer Zadig. That's sort of my career trajectory in a nutshell, and how I came to, I guess, a really high level look at how I ended up, like what I studied and what made me get into law school.
Perfect. You answered some of the questions that I was going to ask, especially, what kind of made you want to pursue a legal career. So thank you for that. And I just kind of want to move on to law school. That's kind of my first question. Like you said, I know you graduated from Osgood, which is actually my dream law school. That's where I want to go.
It was
Um,
mine too.
yeah, I don't know. At first, I thought U of T, but I'm like, I think I want to step away from U of T. That's enough. And go to Osgood. And I know you were in a lot of programs within law school and you received a lot of awards. So I was just wondering, how was your law school experience? And how did you kind of make the most of it? Do you have any kind of tips to get into some of these programs that you were in? How did you kind of make the most of law school?
It's funny because law school was so long ago now. I graduated in 2016. I guess it didn't sound that long, but it was like a whole other world ago. And um, someone asked me the other day, like, what kind of volunteer work did you do in law school? And I was like, well, like they were asking me about like as it relates to my experience today. I was like, oh, does I like that's such an interesting question because it seems so long ago. So I'm like well primed for this question. Um, I very much approached my time at Osgood as I did everything. I took every opportunity I could, and I applied to every opportunity possible. I wanted to make sure that I learned as much about myself and I used all the resources available to me. I was also like nerdishly excited to be at Osgood. I felt I felt very proud to be there and um, I wanted to make like ingratiate myself in the community there as much as possible. And so I did all kinds of things. I was hugely a part of mock trial, which is it's like does this it's sort of like what's the word for it? It's like a song and dance show that the school puts on every year, and they put on like the law students put on every year, and you write your own, you direct, you write your own material, you act, you sing, there's dancing. Um, there's a specific term for it that's totally escaped my mind. Um, I I did that for 2 years, my last 2 years at the school. Um, and I loved that. I was really deeply involved in that. But also, I was like on a committee, like the library committee. I represented this JD student at the library committee, where I sat in a group with faculty council and with the master students, and we talked about ways to make the library experience better. Which I bring up because it was so random, but it was actually a really good networking opportunity that no one would think of. Um, I was a upper year buddy to a first year student. I worked with what's called CLASP, which is the Community Legal Aid Students Program, and I was a caseworker, which just meant that I looked at disclosure for simple criminal cases that the program would take on. Um, yeah, I was an editor for the Journal of Law and Social Policy. Like I'm giving you the like, stuff that was academic, stuff that was very social, stuff that was kind of hard to define, stuff that was operational to the school. I did whatever I could to get this as much of the school on my resume as possible.
For sure. And I think it's really important. And people say the same thing when I first went into undergrad and I was asking people, like, how do I make the most of my undergrad experience? And they really said take any opportunity you get to get involved and to be a part of your school community. So I think that definitely applies to any law school you go to as well. Uh,
It's true. It's just there's so much opportunity that might not feel like much in the moment, but really pays in the future, just in terms of the connections you make and the experience you get, and everyone that you go to law school with. Like, there's a good chance, one of them will be a judge one day. So it doesn't hurt to know as many of them as possible.
For sure. Networking is super important, and the more you get
Mm.
involved in groups and programs, organizations, the more you meet people, that could really help you, possibly advance your career in life. So, yeah, I think it's super important. So now I want to talk about your specific fields. I know your practice focuses on criminal, constitutional, and public law, which are actually all areas I'm very interested in, which is quite a diverse practice and obviously extremely important fields. So it says that you have defended clients that have participated in things like armed robbery and first degree murder. And what I found also really interesting is that you maintain a prison law practice and you assist clients that navigate the correctional system. And we all know that the correctional system has very major flaws. So I do have to ask, what drew you to this type of work? What kind of drew you to these high profile cases that, many lawyers can't take on? I think I don't know, like I feel like you have to be some a specific kind of person in order to really take on these big daunting cases.
I don't think I sought them out. Like I didn't go into this because I wanted to work on these, the highest profile of cases, but I was working, I think it was just sort of happenstance. I didn't like, it's not too sexy. I think I just got kind of lucky. I was working at, when I was working at Hicks Adams, it just so happened that the firm happened to have a ton of, like, Christopher Hicks, the main partner there, runs was running a very robust homicide practice. And it just so happened that when I was articling, um, he had a number of high profile homicides under him. And I saw that as an opportunity to just, and him and I at the time worked well together. So I just jumped into as many, same approach I took at Osgood, like do as much as you can while you can. And that's um, how I came into it. It is a lot of work. Um, I I wouldn't, I was sort of practicing in at a crazy clip when I started. A lot of it was excitement. I mean, you have to, that's what brought me to criminal law. Was the first thing that I could work at relentlessly without any sort of question or regret. And I think that's sort of what's paved the way in my career, because you really can't do this if you want to phone, if you're prone to phoning things in. Um, but I think there was just a lot of it. And also, people might like high profile work, but they don't like homicides or vice versa. Homicide cases in criminal law are the most interesting, in terms of like the legal aspects, the different angles, the possible defenses. There's just so much law, and um, just they're just heavily studied and discussed, and I find them to be the most legally interesting. And I something I just sort of immediately grabbed onto in that sense. So in not so simple of a way, that's how I came into it. I just they were The files were there. I had my choice of them, and um, I sort of quickly developed a sense of how to run these files, and they became very interesting to me. And then they've also a lot of my appellate work has had to do with homicide cases as well, and they that the trial work and the appellate work in that sense go very nicely, go hand in hand.
For sure. So yeah, it seems like you very much enjoy it, and like you, I do find criminal law probably the most interesting out of all legal fields. I haven't concluded if that's something that I do want to go into, because as a lot of lawyers have told me that sometimes, they think they're going to go into criminal law and then they end up going into like commercial law or family law once they get into law school and actually start
Okay.
learning about the fields more, in depth. But what do you find kind of most challenging about the fields that you work in, or what's something that you maybe not like about them?
One thing that you have to sort of live with going into crim is it's sort of just assumed that you're going to be paid less than everyone else. There's a lot of poor stereotypes that come when you go to law school, or you accept a job in crim. It's because Bay Street and those kinds of jobs are so heavily pushed. A lot of people will think that you're going into crim because there was just nothing else. Because the truth, I mean, it's not, and it has nothing to do with that. It's just the resources speak for themselves, right? Like, who are your clients in crim versus who are your clients on Bay Street? And I can tell you that my love for it was enough to just sort of get over that. And I was already pretty quickly involved in cases that garnered a lot of attention and really silenced quickly, just as quickly, people who might have disparaged the career path. Um, and I would say that's one of the difficulties in going into the practice. Um, there are ways to make money for sure, but it's not as much of a given as it might be in other areas. But there's give and take in both those situations. Like, I could never do the work of someone, at a corporate firm, and I've worked experiences now where it's about like um, with a different kind of clientele, and I know it's just not for me, and I know that. I think that a lot of people get lost because they don't know that, or they figure it out too late, and they've committed to an idea that is someone else's and not theirs, and that's a lot of the issue that some people like. And if you know what you want to do and you're sure and you know yourself, then there's no issue. But so many people who go to law school are young. I thankfully had worked a couple of years, and even though I wasn't old, I was older than someone going straight from university into law school. Um, a secondary issue is you take on a lot going into criminal law because it's you as one person who stands between your client's best interests and the pull of the state. And the state is incredibly powerful and has any resource it wants available to it. The state is also the mouthpiece for the public. And if you're dealing with cases that are not um, popular, or let's say like maybe a sex assault or something like that, it can be tough on you. You have to have a very thick skin, uh, and that's assuming you have a great client. So to deal with all of the state facing of the stuff against the state, but now you have a very difficult client that makes the job very, very tough. And I only say that because that's, I think, what I've seen really affect or afflict many colleagues I've met through the process. But I think if you are clear on what your goals are and what's important to you and why you do the work, of course we want to help our clients, but it's more so about bringing fairness to the process. And if you keep that line clear to yourself and you know that that's just what you're doing and that's your goal, if anything happens where you don't feel like you can keep that goal anymore, then perhaps you shouldn't continue with that case. And if you keep the lines as simple and clean as that, then I think that those concerns and those stressors that can come from having a difficult client or facing the pressures of the state, they can be overcome. I say that because I'm at a place now. Like, I've been practicing. I'm in my fifth year. I'm sorry. I have this the window for my condo is in my glasses, and I hate it. I'm now realizing what I'm there's a lot of turnover, and a lot of this probably expedited because of COVID. But I've really been reflecting lately on why, on what patterns I'm seeing. And a lot of patterns that I see are people who want to change the world tomorrow. They don't, and they're not, like, they put the cart before the horse. Um, it doesn't, you have to, a part of you, to do good work, um, you have to walk, not sprint. Because if you sprint, you'll burn out, and you'll probably add to uh, the wreckage that already exists in the criminal justice system.
For sure, in school, we we learn about a lot of the flaws within the criminal justice system.
That's good. I didn't at all in law school.
Really? You didn't learn about any of that?
Yeah, not the flaws. No, we just learned like this is criminal law. This is the procedure. I happen to be aware of like privy because of my own experience, but if I hadn't had that experience, it would have been a complete wake up call, like a disastrous wake up call.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I mean, especially because, you went into criminal law. If you didn't know about that, you're right, it would have been such a wake-up call because, like, I guess you would have to have um, learn that while you're starting to
It,
practice, which could be
it's
super,
shock.
super hard
It,
and shocking.
it's shocking. It is shocking. I think that's another issue I see with colleagues is the shock of all of that. Like they're very well educated, they're very smart, they're exceptional in many ways, but dealing with the real life aspects of so much of what I mean, you do see a lot of traumatizing things or what could be traumatizing and triggering, and not being ill equipped to deal with that or being unprepared is it can be a total shock to the system.
For
And
sure.
if I could just jump in, just on this topic too, I feel like, yeah, throughout school we are taught the laws, but just the way that the system functions itself isn't talked about to people that aren't interested in the legal field. I feel like, even just from like my personal experience as well, and with family and things like that, like the court system and the way that it goes, um, being a client or a victim, on that side of things, that's not really taught to people and put in that position, which I feel like is a huge issue too, right? Because if, as the lawyer, and you're trying to help out your clients, you're trying to help out these people, and at the same time you're trying to educate them on how the system works. And I feel like a lot of people are just very oblivious, to how it goes. So it's a big role to take for sure.
It is part of being an effective lawyer is you have to educate your clients, and a lot of them have preconceived notions of how things are supposed to go. Um, I think a mistake a lot of lawyers make is they sell themselves out to be magicians. I take the exact opposite approach. My approach is um, you've hired me to like as a professional who was going to advise you throughout this process. I'm gonna let you know every step of what happens. I'll take care of the stuff you don't want to take care of. Um, but at some point, you're gonna have to make a decision. And the part about, I mean, that I try to not oversell anything. If anything, I probably undersell. And but I try to be as realistic and as possible because the worst thing you can do not is not manage expectations, especially when the expectations affect the core of someone's livelihood. And what a lot of people don't know, and they find out too late, is that the state and the crown, as a lawyer for the state, controls the tempo in court up until the point of trial. The crown doesn't want to resolve, you're not resolving. If the crown wants to charge you with this offense, you're charged with it. And you have to not, I don't want to say play nice, but you have to work in those boundaries. And a lot of people have a hard time understanding that concept.
For sure. No, I totally understand that. I mean, even the public too. A lot of criminal defense lawyers are very much looked down upon in society as people always say, oh, well, they're just defending the bad guy. They're just, defending the bad guy. Um, so I can only imagine that kind of pressure just by public on criminal lawyers as well, um, which can be challenging, I'm sure. Um,
It's it is, but then I know what the world would be like if we didn't exist.
oh, for sure.
So I laugh when people, I mean, I get asked, it's just so silly. Like, how do you defend those people? Well, like you could be that person. Like
Exactly.
everyone is that person. Everyone has had a run-in with the police. The only reason why you weren't arrested is because a criminal lawyer did something to protect your rights 20 years ago. So, you know, you're an idiot. That's like what I'm saying in my head when someone asks, and I just laugh and
Yeah.
laugh it off.
Well, it's totally like the preconceived notions of the way that people kind of look at the system. It's like, okay, well, the Crown gets everything right. Like, they would never charge somebody that didn't do it.
Well,
Or
I work for someone who would, you know, lose his mind to hear a sentence like that, because he's been at the forefront of unearthing, I think, something like 22 wrongful convictions.
yeah,
And many of those wrongful
Yeah.
convictions are because the Crown decided this guy is guilty, and that was it. One of them, I think, Guy Paul Morin, the lead Crown, is now a judge because, well, I'm not going to say why, but she's a judge, and
Yeah.
In her evidence on the Morin inquiry, the first day of her evidence, she said, this was after he was exonerated, the DNA came back, it's not him. The first day of her evidence, she said, I still believe it's him. And then on the second day, there was an upheaval of emotion. And that's not, I'm not saying that any facetious way. It's just, it's human nature to get an idea in your head, or you see this a lot in police investigations where there's some modicum of information that leads in the direction of a person. It's just very easy to commit to that idea. Yeah. Especially if you invested hundreds of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars of resources to that idea.
Yeah, exactly. They will stick with it. I'm from Winnipeg originally, so I'm pretty familiar with quite a few wrongful.
Right. Well, Ostrovsky was a big one Frank Ostrovsky was a big one out of Manitoba that I wasn't involved in the wrongful conviction part, but I was involved in, during the, I don't know if I have time to talk about this, but
go ahead.
Frank Ostrovsky was convicted of murder, and there was an inquiry done that had nothing to do with Ostrovsky, but as part of that inquiry, it was revealed that Crown's office, there was a lot of miscarriages of justice coming out of that office. And one of the files that was implicated was Ostrovsky's. And so James Lockyer got a whiff of that, and he explored it, and it turned out that Ostrovsky was a victim of wrongful conviction and of the miscarriage of justice coming out of this Crown's office. And so he applied for ministerial review to the Minister of Justice, and the Minister of Justice, after many years, agreed. What happened then is they sent the case back to the Court of Appeal in Winnipeg. And the question became, should he be acquitted or should the charge be stayed? And when you're quibbling about this at that level, it's a big deal, because an acquittal means you're innocent. That's the communication. And a stay means not as strong of a statement.
Yeah.
And I think that the Winnipeg the Manitoba Court of Appeal issued a stay. And then the CBC, something came up in the application I can't talk about. And the CBC wished to report on that. And the Court of Appeal said no. And then the CBC appealed that ruling to the Supreme Court. And that's when I got involved at the Supreme Court of Canada, when we were responding to the CBC's application to get access to publicize this very interesting thing that came out of the ministerial review application for Frank Ostrovsky.
That's so interesting.
Is it? I'm like, this is like, I sleep talking about this.
I was like, wow. Appearing at the Supreme Court of Canada how many times have you appeared at the Supreme Court of Canada? Was it just that case?
Twice. No, I've done it twice, and I'm supposed to go a third time in November.
Okay.
Yeah. On a homicide, I won a homicide case at the Court of Appeal, but the Court of Appeal Ontario, any Court of Appeal in the country, when you argue in front of them, it's in front of 3 judges, and you win when all 3 judges agree. And in my case, 2 of the judges agreed with me, and there was a dissent. And the opposing party can go to the Supreme Court as of right on the basis of that dissent.
Yes.
So the Crown is appealing my win at the Court of Appeal on the basis of one of the judges who didn't agree with me.
And this is the homicide case.
Yeah, this case, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Canley, but my client was Richard Dockstader. So you can Google it too, and it'll come up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it said in 2021 you were also invited to appear before the Mass Casualty Commission in regards to the Nova Scotia shootings from April 2020, and I know many of us, if not all of us, are familiar with this. Could you maybe tell us about that experience and your role in that particular case?
Yes. So what's not included in that write-up is my role. I was invited because our client was Lisa Banfield, who was the common law partner of the shooter.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, this is this. I don't know. It's heavy. It's heavy because she was criminally charged almost a year, maybe 9 months after the shooting. She was criminally charged with transferring ammo along with her brother and her brother-in-law to the shooter. But the Crown had conceded that they did not know what he was going to do. And so the whole time, I mean, the reason why her being charged was really just offensive to anyone's senses. She had been a victim of the worst kinds of all kinds of domestic violence at the hands of this man. It was well known. This wasn't like a secret behind closed doors. The police investigating knew this. He was actually trying to kill her that night and went off and did what he did. So for her to be criminally charged after that is just really like so many months later. It's really quite jolting.
Mm-hmm.
So we were retained to assist her criminally. And then the commission formed a couple months after that. And then I was invited, me and James Lockyer were invited to be counsel as part of counsel on behalf of Lisa Banfield as part of the commission.
Yes.
And that came to place in April to May of 2021. And in November of 2021, I went to the commission. I went to Halifax by myself, and I represented Lisa on a number of meetings. I since then her charges have been, believe they've been stayed or withdrawn, or they've resolved in a way that's not going to end up as a conviction whatsoever, which was, I mean, the right result under the circumstances, but I mean, she should never have been in that position to begin with. So I was asked because there's the commission is very interested. So the commission is interested in figuring out how this came to happen, because there's a lot of concerns around the response time of different law enforcement bodies that were on the ground at the time and not on the ground. And there's also, as a secondary piece to their exploration, the commission is also interested in sort of like a female rights side of this, because of the way Lisa Banfield has been treated, she was clearly a victim of abuse, and maybe also of systemic abuse afterwards. So that's why why they wanted her to have counsel, to make sure that her voice was heard, but also that we could help them explore those issues. Mm-hmm. And she's actually testified before the inquiry, and it's public. You can see it. She testified in July. It's quite powerful testimony. I was watching remotely. But the commission is ongoing, so they're still investigating, like RCMP officers. I think they're investigating the commissioner of the RCMP today. I don't know. It's probably continuing tomorrow. But it's the idea is they're going to come up with a report at the end of all of this to document their findings on why this happened, what, I guess conclusions on what went wrong. And the idea is supposed to be what can we do better going forward.
For sure. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing
That's you.
that.
That's heavy. That
Yeah.
so that's a case as an example of one where um, probably one of the most difficult for me.
Hmm.
It was just I don't I can't say too much, but
Oh, for sure.
what I will say is that I very much enjoyed working with Lisa Banfield. I think she and her family were very wonderful people,
Hmm.
and it was very frustrating for me to work with them against the state.
The state, for sure.
Yeah, sure.
Especially with such a highly publicized case as well. And,
Yeah.
Right.
it's a big deal. So I could imagine how difficult that would have been. It's almost like you against the entire country. Um,
Uh,
like,
yeah, I mean, it was there was
yeah.
a lot of inquiries into her, a lot of inquiries into us, a lot of like local Halifax reports written. um, the community as well, like the victims, the family, very
Oh, for sure.
a lot of them when she was charged, that was the only information they had received in months about anything, and they understandably uh, I won't say took out aggression, but they pointed their emotions toward in her direction,
Hmm.
which was unfair for her, but also it's unfair for them that that's like the only option that they were given in those circumstances.
Of course.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
Everything comes.
a lot of much much bigger than criminal law, that case.
Oh, of
Mhm.
course. There's so much things that go into it. And I know you said that you were actually invited to that commission, you know, because uh, you are, I think you said because you're a woman, right? And, there's a
It was no,
feminine,
it was because Lisa was like a woman, and
yeah,
we were representing her.
a woman, exactly. So as, as a woman in law, and just kind of speaking on the idea of challenges, Um, we have had a lot of female lawyers on here speaking about how it was really hard to kind of navigate some of the legal fields that they were in just because they were a woman and they were looked down upon. Um, have you maybe faced any of that kind of, I don't know, stigma or experiences
Yeah,
that just because you're a
I've
woman?
appeared in courts where only lawyers can talk, and I'm asked if I'm a paralegal, and if I say I've said no, and I've asked again, it's just like hard to believe. I don't know why. Like I mean, I do know. I have some thoughts on why, but um, many times I've been treated terribly in courtrooms. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm not like and it tends to be by people who in courts where there's different levels of court. So courts that are often reported upon, like, appellate courts, I've never had these issues there. I've always been treated equally,
Mhm.
like everyone else. Like we're all there making an argument.
Sure.
But courts where um, you don't have to rely so much on written law is where I have faced most backlash, because at that point it's not, oh, I like, you have a ton of written decisions. You have some credibility. At that point, it's just purely who's this face in front of me. And
Yeah, who's talking right now?
yeah, and I have been in situation. I mean, I had 3 Court of Appeal decisions released in 1 week. And during that week, I was in the midst of a long hearing, and the hearing judge refused to let me speak.
What?
Wow.
Yeah, it was an awful experience, really awful. And
I'm so
Well,
sorry.
oh no, I mean it's fine. It's just telling, right? Like you could
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So I've definitely had those experiences, and that one is the worst, I would say, because it was just, most of them were earlier in my career. And a lot of them were like out of town, and I like things that were like kind of small events that I could like, that was annoying. That was really frustrating, but like I could easily push it away and move on.
Right.
But this was an experience that I like far along in my career. Most people in the courtroom, especially in Toronto, like, know of me to some extent. And I am being treated this way, like as if I'm speaking out of turn, or I'm swearing, like something, like I'm doing something. I'm not doing it. Half the time I wasn't even talking.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so there's definitely those kinds of, I've definitely had those kinds of challenges, unfortunately. I think other things are like, back before when we were going to court in person more frequently, I remember I'd be going in through court security. I'd be clearly carrying like a barrister's bag and wearing a suit. And I'd be going the first time I'd enter during the day, fine, right, I'll show you my ID. But I'm now entering like 3 times later that day, and I still have to show my ID. Meanwhile, I can see my taller colleague with shorter hair of a certain persuasion, and no issues, just
Wow.
cruising on by. Stuff
Yeah.
like that, like little things like that.
For sure. Yeah, no, like a lot of lawyers like you have said, female lawyers have said that it's hard to be taken seriously in, in the legal field, even starting at law school too. Some lawyers have told me that, their professors even treat them differently just because they are a woman in law. Um,
I feel like that's probably true,
mhm.
but I don't think I was confident until a couple of years ago. So and now I think back on it, it might be because I was made to feel a certain way. And so I internalized it.
Mhm.
But now I've achieved, not that, like, I'm not, there's still a student in many ways, but you get to a certain point and you're like, people like, I kind of know what I know a thing or two. And when you're still treated like you don't by people who know nothing about you, then it's like, maybe it was never me. Maybe like I've been living like this for a long time, and only now I'm recognizing that, um, I'm just not encouraged to speak out in any way. And that's why I never did previously. And now I think, but I think my concern too with women going into the law is that we internalize so much of what happens and how we're treated as our own, as like just every day. Like the
Over
stories I've
time.
told you about, being called a paralegal, or,
Mhm.
being treated differently than a male colleague going in through security. Those are things I just sort of internalized. Like, oh, well, it's part of looking a certain way.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
I think when I had that experience with past fall, right before I did the inquiry,
Mm-hmm.
that's flown out to Halifax on behalf of the government, and like I'm being treated this
Yeah.
like, that's, I think, when I was like, no, like this is not okay, and I don't want people to think that it is, because there's so many of us who go into this without, they go on their own, or they're sole practitioners, and they may not have the network to know or to communicate that it's not you. Like, this is not acceptable. And even though you can't really speak out about it, we can't, yell at the judge. There's ways to deal with it, that, um, where you don't have to fault yourself for something you actually never did,
Mhm.
Right.
For
for
sure.
just existing.
Yeah.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, no, you're right. I guess in the beginning it did seem like normalized almost. But I guess that experience really like opened your eyes. Like, hey, wait, no, hold on a second. This isn't
Mhm.
right.
No, I mean, it doesn't make it easier. It's still
For
very
sure.
frustrating,
Oh, for
but
sure.
at least the more you talk about it, the more you feel better about it, knowing it's not you. This is just a thing that happens
It's
in
the
particular
system. Yeah.
Yeah.
the system.
Take it
It's
personally type
very
of thing.
It's very systemic. Like a lot of flaws in the court. It's systemic.
Yeah.
No, okay, I kind of want to move on to something a little lighter. Um,
I'm
as
actually gonna turn on my light now, if that's okay.
oh, lighter, perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, on that point.
On that point. Um, okay, like it seems like you are extremely busy, you take on a wide variety of cases. Um, your typical day must be full of responsibilities and tasks, and so I wanted to kind of know when or what do you do to kind of balance your work life with a social life? How do you have that like downtime, relaxation time? Because obviously, if you keep go like if you keep working, obviously it's not good for your mental health. So, um, a lot of lawyers have came on here and said what they do in their free time. And as a criminal lawyer, um, how do you balance that?
Well, you're talking to me after I've just come back from like a month off.
Oh,
I got married and then we went on our honeymoon. So
congratulations.
thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank you. So I always find this question tricky to answer because I met my husband at Osgood and he's also a lawyer and our careers are very important to us. And there's been lots of time where we've worked weekends and all the time, and there's times where we don't. And I think the best I don't know that I can't say that I think about it in terms of I, this amount of time will be spent working and this amount of time won't. Um, what I do is I try to stay very in tune with myself.
Mhm.
And when I need a break or I need to relax, I'll take a bath. That's something I've learned is very nice. Or I think for me it's just really important to kind of sound so lame, but just to make time to spend with my husband. That's
Oh, like
probably
that's
like
sweet.
the best answer I can give. It's the really, yeah, like whatever, as long as we get a few moments and it makes me feel human. Um,
Right.
that's that's it.
I'm sure he feels the same way considering he's a lawyer as well. Is he a criminal lawyer too? If you don't maybe
No, he does employment law.
employment law. Okay. Yeah, no, I'm sure he feels the same way.
I think if I mentioned that he is because I think if we work very similar and just as much champion of my work as I am of his. And but I think if I was with someone or had a partner who was not part of this kind of world, it would be a very different story.
Mhm.
For sure.
Okay, so I guess my last question, and I don't know if Veronica, you
Aw.
have more. I know this is fun. I like this. It's probably one of my favorite sessions. It's very interesting. I love when I interview criminal lawyers because they always have, really juicy things to say. But I know many of us.
They tend to be my favorite kind of people.
Mhm. I know many of us are heading into the direction of becoming lawyers, possibly even criminal defense ones, and I know this can be very exciting yet super daunting, and maybe even worrisome for some people. So, what is one piece of advice that you can give the next generation of aspiring legal professionals who might possibly want to follow in your footsteps?
Uh, um, don't adhere to those footsteps too closely. So much of what you're going to do and your biggest success will come from you. I think where I have felt the worst about myself has been when I have tried to, I've not tried, but like leveled myself up to someone else. And it's never, just stay true to you. I think the best thing anyone can do, that's also just so cliche, but the best thing anyone can really do for themselves going into something that's so demanding is just make sure you have a good relationship with yourself, because you will not be able to, you have to really dig deep on some days to be great at anything. You have to dig deep, and if you don't have the wherewithal to do that, if you don't know yourself, if you don't listen to yourself, um, it's going to be very hard to cure head clear, because it's easy to get wrapped up in the wrong things, especially with law Twitter and the demands of it's not even don't even, but it's I think part of I'm a certain age where I was like not too old to be on not be on Insta. Like I have Instagram, I don't have TikTok, but I wasn't like I was too old to be like obsessed with social media the way that like younger people are now, thank God.
Sure.
And that's sort of given me an ability to look back and see and observe almost academically.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be so overwhelming. And if you don't have a strong sense of self, or if you have, that's, it's hard when you're young, but if you don't focus on yourself and who you are and what you need and what speaks to you and what doesn't, and what your gifts are versus what someone else's gifts are, and that it's okay to not have those gifts that someone else has, you can still be successful. If you don't have those conversations with yourself, having those conversations with yourself make this a lot easier.
For sure. I think nowadays it's so easy, especially through social media, on Instagram and whatnot, to be so wrapped up in the lives of other people and compare
Believe the hype.
yourself. Oh my gosh, people compare
So
themselves like it's no tomorrow.
there's nothing, I felt very not special, coming through this world, going to law school. I felt very average, if not less than average. And I think that I think I've done well for someone, who has felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that way because I was comparing myself. I compared myself to so many other people. But when I started focusing on my own gifts and trusting them and what I'm good at, I became so much better. And then you realize everyone's got stuff.
Oh, for sure.
But I almost like you waste time chasing things outside of yourself, chasing gifts that are others. You can be inspired, but just because someone reads a certain way doesn't mean you have to.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful advice. I just have to say, really, I hear that right now.
I'm so sorry, you're breaking up, and I feel like I'm missing something so beautiful.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I was just saying that that's really wonderful advice, and it's definitely something that I feel like I really hear.
You're breaking out a little bit, Veronica. It's something that you needed to hear. Oh, I think she's
Internet today.
Internet. It's always internet.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'll talk slower just in case I'm cutting out again.
Sure.
It was really wonderful advice, and really something that I feel like I needed to hear at this point in my life, when I'm kind of navigating what I want to do in law, what kind of area of law I'm interested in. It was just really, really good advice, I think, especially for young women who are trying to figure it out. So I really appreciate that, actually.
How old are you both, if you don't mind my asking? I mean, I imagine like early 20s.
Yeah.
I'll be 21 in February, so 20.
Yeah, I'll be 21 in October.
Okay, well, I hate to sound corny, but when I was 21, 20, I had no aspirations whatsoever. I just wanted to I just graduated law school or university, and I just wanted a job to like figure out my life. I had no plans. I had no I didn't think I was good at anything. I started working at this with these lawyers, and I remember looking at their law society. They're not really degrees, but the certificates, they're licensing certificates, and thinking like, wow, like I could never do that. That's so much like standardized testing, the bar exam, the LSAT. Like I can barely write a sentence. Like this is how low I didn't feel unhappy, but in retrospect, like I felt very low on myself. I didn't feel like I could dream, and I'm not regretful because it compelled me to work incredibly hard. And but just so you know, like that's what's in my background. Like you guys are way ahead of where I was at this point in my life, the same point, and I'm, you know, much older than you now, but that I remember that road and that path that part of my life till now very, very clearly. So I mean, I think that's a story that we don't hear from a lot of people who have had some kind of success. And maybe it's because a lot of people have resources behind them that make them feel prepared for that. But I didn't. I don't come from that kind of world. I'm the first person to go to university. I'm the first person to, I'm the only person ever to go to professional school in any family I've been a part of down the like ancestrally wise.
Yeah.
So
I resonate with that. Yeah.
I had nothing to turn to. I had no one pushing me to do anything because no one knew that there were options to do anything. So to go from that to arguing at the Supreme Court is a big leap when you put it that way. But
amazing. How long after, oh my gosh, I'm prolonging this. How long after university did you go to law school?
3.5 years.
3.5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like
Yeah.
the expectation, and a lot of my friends, what they're doing, and like I said, sometimes I just compare myself and I feel so far behind. Like I already have friends who are studying for the LSAT, and I decided to leave that till next year. And sometimes I look at them and I'm like, okay, maybe that should have been me. Maybe I should have allocated some time in this summer to study for the LSAT. But I just have to keep reminding myself that we're all at different stages in life.
Yeah.
It's not perfect. Nothing, some people will have the perfect line
Mhm.
and some people won't. I definitely, the only perfect, there's like so many different steps to law school. There's writing the LSAT, there's getting in, there's
Yeah.
then passing, then there's writing the bar and getting articling and like doing all those things by certain timelines. And my husband, for example, like he's brilliant, and he did his master's, he did his, he did his BA, then his master's. He wrote the LSAT. He applied to law school 4 times and wrote the LSAT just as many and had an incredible score on the LSAT, and then got in, finally did incredible, and then had difficulty getting an articling position. And he made it happen. But it was, he had to have a really strong resolve to get through all of that. In my example, for me, I wrote the LSAT many times in a row, like straight. Like I decided 1 year before going to law school, I was going to do it, which was probably not ill-fated, but it was a haphazard decision. I wrote it way too many times in a year. And on my last time, it was like some schools weren't even accepting that the LSAT at that day. And I wasn't, I don't know. I was just like, it was just so messy. It felt, but the thing that I got lucky was I applied once and I got in once. But I was also, at the time, I felt so much older than everyone. I just turned 26 when I went to law school. And in retrospect, I was a child, but back then everyone's like 22, 23. I'm a freaking old woman at 26, having lived a little bit. So, but I never let that. I was always happy to just be there, just be anywhere. I was just happy to be.
Mhm.
I don't know what. So if it makes you feel any better, like I didn't even know what an LSAT was. Like writing it seemed like ridiculous, like a ridiculous concept that was not meant for me at all. So you'll know.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I know. I don't want to say that's like reassuring, but like it kind of is.
Although it should be, because when it's like I don't want to leave it. I don't want to be all mystical here, but things happen when they happen for a reason.
Oh, 100. Oh, I am such a strong believer in that. Everything happens for a reason, and what is meant to be will be.
I've never forced anything. I forced myself into positions. I forced myself into places, but I it felt right to me. I've never put
Right.
myself in a position that didn't feel right.
Mhm. For sure.
And if it doesn't feel right doing the LSAT, then it's not. I wrote one of the LSATs I wrote, I canceled while I was writing it. I was like, this is not going well for me. Bye. You can do that. You
Yeah,
can, like, there's
not this time.
yeah, I just knew this is not
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, a lot of people don't live life that way, but
Trust
I
your intuition.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all you have.
That's a really good way of living life. I like that.
Yeah.
Walking
I
out
feel
of your
like it's more
LSAT.
peaceful too. Yeah.
Oh my
I mean, it was not something that felt great at the time, but
Well, yeah. Looking back, you're like,
yeah,
good thinking.
God.
probably didn't want that. Probably didn't want that outside mark on my record.
Oh, I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that is it for today. But Jessica, I'd like to thank you so much for being here and taking time or talking about your career as a lawyer and your journey into the legal field. It was all so insightful and interesting, and the advice you gave was amazing. I know
But my pleasure.
uh,
It was really nice speaking to you both too. You're both very exciting futures ahead of you, and you're doing such good work with
thank
this
you.
organization.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. Don't be strangers.
It won't be.
We won't be. Have a wonderful night and good luck.
Thanks, guys.
Everything. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.